There is a specific kind of silence that you only hear in a place where people used to live, but do not anymore. It is not the silence of the deep bush, full of native birds and the rustling wind. No, this is a much heavier silence. It is the silence of walls that once held conversations, laughter, and bitter arguments over whose turn it was to do the dishes. New Zealand is full of those silences, tucked into steep, lightless valleys and clinging to rugged, storm-battered coastlines. Today, we are going to dive to the very bottom of this country's forgotten history. We will peel back the beautiful green layers of Aotearoa to uncover 7 distinct levels of isolation. These are the hidden secrets of the map, places where time did not just stop, it folded in on itself and died. Imagine the cold, damp air creeping over rusting iron machinery. Imagine the smell of black mold and rotting totara wood. Think about the relentless, patient creep of the native forest as it slowly takes back every brick, every timber, and every human memory, dragging it all down into the earth. The pioneers came here thinking they could tame this land, but the mountains are patient, and the forest always wins. Take a deep breath. Let the chill of the southern wind settle into your bones. We are going in. Level 1. The surface, known. We begin our descent where the light still reaches. These are the ruins that still appear in the glossy pages of guidebooks, the places where the echoes of the past have been neatly packaged for passing travelers. They are empty, yes, but they do not yet feel dangerous. In the late 1800s, the southern valleys of the South Island were infected with a very specific, very destructive kind of madness: gold. It was a fever that drove men to cross oceans and march into environments that actively wanted to kill them. Imagine Mace Town, hidden deep within the unforgiving, claustrophobic embrace of the Arrow Gorge in central Otago. In 1862, a man named William Fox discovered gold in the freezing waters of the Arrow River. Almost overnight, this brutal, isolated gorge exploded into a chaotic existence. Imagine thousands of hopeful, desperate souls dragging themselves in their heavy canvas tents up a treacherous, freezing riverbed. There were no roads, there was no mercy, just the blinding, intoxicating promise of pulling wealth from the dirt. They built an entire civilization out of nothing. They dragged heavy timber and stone through the mud to construct cottages, bakeries, hotels, and a school. At its peak, over 300 souls called this miserable, freezing gully home. You have to understand the sheer willpower required to live here. In the dead of winter, the sun barely reaches the floor of the gorge. The frost is so thick it looks like snow, and the air bites at your exposed skin like glass. Yet, they stayed. They built massive, groaning stamper batteries, gigantic iron machines that crushed quartz rock day and night. Imagine the sound, a deafening, rhythmic thumping that echoed off the sheer canyon walls, 24 hours a day, shaking the dust from the rafters of the miners' cottages. It was the heartbeat of an empire. But gold is a finite promise. The earth gives only what it has, and then it closes its fist. By the early 1900s, the river had been bled entirely dry. The easily accessible gold was gone, and the deep quartz veins became too expensive to mine. Slowly, the heartbeat stopped. The crushing machines fell silent. The families packed whatever they could carry onto the backs of tired horses and walked back down the river, never to return. Today, Macetown is a sun-bleached skeleton. The wind howls through the beautifully restored stone bakehouse, blowing dead brown tussock grass across the threshold. The old schoolmaster's house stands utterly alone against the autumn frost. Rusty iron hinges shriek against the wind, while thick white mist crawls slowly through the valleys where hundreds once toiled in the freezing mud. It is a beautiful, melancholic ruin. You can drive a four-wheel drive vehicle up there on a Sunday, have a picnic, and take a photograph standing next to the rusted bones of the crushing battery. It is safe. It is understood. But that is merely the surface. let us step off the beaten tourist trail and descend deeper into the bush. Level 2. The Waterline. Half knowledge. The air grows noticeably colder here. The light begins to fail. The settlements we find at this second level of the iceberg were not born of golden dreams and sudden wealth. They were born of punishing, relentless, industrial nightmares. Welcome to the coal plateaus. High above the crashing, violent waves of the Tasman Sea, on the notoriously unforgiving west coast, sits Denniston. To call it a town is almost a polite fiction. It was an exile. Perched on a bleak, fog-choked rock plateau 600 meters above sea level, Denniston was a place that actively, violently hated the people who lived there. The environment here is hostile in a way that is hard to comprehend until you stand on the edge of the cliff. The wind up here does not just blow, it screams. It carries freezing rain horizontally, stripping the warmth from your bones in seconds and turning the ground into a permanent black slurry of mud and coal dust. In 1879, an engineering marvel and a terrifying death trap was completed. It was known as the Denniston Incline. It was a railway track that plunged down the side of the mountain at an impossibly steep angle. To get to your home on the plateau or to leave it, you had to ride this incline. Imagine it. Imagine sitting inside a small wooden coal wagon dangling over a deadly dizzying precipice on a single braided steel wire. You were looking down at a drop that would instantly kill you if that wire snapped. You can hear the groaning of the massive iron brakes, smelling the burning friction as the wagon slowly lowers you through the thick gray clouds. That was the daily commute for the men, women, and children of Denniston. Everything came up that terrifying incline. Flour, timber, beds, and famously, even a piano, strapped to a coal wagon inching its way up into the clouds. Living up there was a test of human endurance. The ground was solid sandstone rock. It was so hard, so unforgiving, that they could not even bury their dead in the soil. When someone passed away, which happened often in the dangerous coal mines, they had to load the coffin onto a wagon and send it back down the terrifying incline just to find soft earth in the valley below. Yet human beings are incredibly stubborn. Despite the sheer hostility of the environment, a sprawling community grew in the fog. Over 1,000 people lived here at its peak. They built concrete bowling greens, huddled by their roaring coal fires, and stared out into the endless gray abyss of the sea, wondering if the sun would ever break through the mist. The children of Denniston played games on the edge of cliffs that dropped 600 meters straight down. They knew the danger. They lived with the constant grinding noise of the coal screens and the black dust that settled into their lungs and their bed sheets. But like the gold in the South, the world's hunger for West Coast coal eventually began to shift. The massive seams of high-grade coal began to dwindle. The mighty, terrifying incline was finally shut down forever in 1967. When the incline stopped, the town died. There was no reason to stay on that freezing rock without the coal. The plateau emptied out as quickly as it had filled. Houses were dismantled for their timber. Others were simply abandoned to the violent weather. Now, if you stand on the edge of the Denniston Plateau, you are met with a profound, heavy emptiness. Only rusting, monstrous machinery and cracked concrete foundations remain. The native alpine scrub, stunted and twisted by the wind, is slowly, methodically devouring the ruins. The fog rolls in, thick and silent, swallowing the old streets until you can barely see your own hands in front of your face. Here, at the Waterline, you can still find the faded ghosts of old roads and the heavy iron scars of human industry. But the isolation is beginning to close in around us. What awaits us further down has long been swallowed by the dense, dark forest. If you enjoy wandering down these forgotten New Zealand tracks with me, and if you appreciate the quiet respect these places demand, consider subscribing to the channel. Because what we will find down on level 5 will absolutely change the way you look at this country. Level 3, The Shallows. Surprise and unease. We are diving deeper now. The places at this level were not built on the hostile edges of jagged cliffs, nor were they hidden in freezing, lightless alpine gorges. They were built in the gentle, rolling green valleys of the North Island, meant to last forever. They were towns with wide, optimistic streets, designed for a future that simply never arrived. Here, we do not find the sudden, violent death of a mining camp. Instead, we find a creeping, slow-motion abandonment, an agonizing, decades-long decay. Let us travel deep into the heart of the King Country, to the isolated township of Ohura. The drive into Ohura is your first warning. The road twists endlessly through dense, dark pine plantations and steep papa rock gorges, isolating you completely from the modern, fast-paced world. By the time you reach the town limits, your radio has turned to static and the air has changed. It feels heavy, stagnant. In the mid-20th century, Ohura was a thriving, muscular hub of industry. It was fueled by deep seams of coal and the relentless expansion of the railway. Imagine a town bursting with life. Hundreds of families lived here. The main street was packed with cars on a Friday night. There was a bustling cinema, a thriving high school, butcher shops, and bakeries. The air smelled of wood smoke, fresh bread, and the sharp metallic tang of the railway yard. But then, the world outside Ohura changed its mind. The government restructured the railways. The coal veins grew too expensive to extract. And slowly, agonizingly, the lifeblood of Ohura began to drain away into the soil. Today, Ohura is a place of deep, profoundly unsettling quiet. Imagine walking down its wide, paved main street. It is completely, utterly empty. The cracked asphalt is being slowly prized apart by stubborn weeds. The storefronts line the street like a row of missing teeth, staring back at you with dead, dusty windows. Inside the old general store, you might still see the faded, sun-bleached shelves waiting for deliveries that ceased decades ago. The paint peels from the grand colonial weatherboards in long, curling strips, looking almost like shedding dead skin. There was a brief glimmer of hope in the 1990s when the government turned the old miners' hostel into a prison, bringing a desperate influx of jobs back to the valley. But even that was fleeting. The prison was eventually shuttered. Now, the imposing facility sits behind high, rusted wire fences, completely empty, sinking slowly into the muddy earth. The most unsettling thing about Ohura is the real estate. Here, deep in the King Country, you can buy an entire house, with land, for less than the price of a cheap second-hand car. It sounds like a dream, does it not? Yet, almost nobody comes. Those few who do arrive, seeking an off-grid utopia, often leave just as quickly. They are chased away by a suffocating silence so thick it rings in your ears, and a damp, rotting pine smell that permeates every piece of clothing. Ohura is a town trapped in purgatory. The houses are still standing, the streetlights still cast a sickly yellow glow at night, but the soul of the place has long since evaporated. We are leaving civilization behind now. Are you ready to step into the dark? Level 4, the depths, secrets, and isolation. Down here in the depths, the stories change. We are no longer looking at towns that died a slow, economic death. We are looking at settlements that the earth simply decided to erase. These were sudden, violent amputations from the map. Places where people laid deep roots, only to have them brutally torn out by the landscape they thought they understood. Consider the terrifying tragedy of Kelso, once hidden away in the lush, fertile plains of West Otago, far to the south. For over a century, Kelso was not a desperate mining camp. It was a prosperous, peaceful farming settlement. Generations of families grew up here. They built a grand dairy factory, a railway station, churches, and a strong, unyielding community. They planted giant oak trees and established gardens that bloomed brilliantly every spring. But Kelso harbored a dark, fatal flaw. It was built right beside the Pomahaka River, and for 100 years the river was only sleeping. In 1978, the water woke up. A massive, historic flood swept through the valley, drowning the town. The residents cleaned up the thick, foul-smelling silt, rebuilt their broken walls, and tried to carry on. They thought the worst was behind them. They were wrong. In 1980, the skies opened again. This time, there was no mercy. Imagine waking in the pitch black of a freezing winter night to the sound of churning, furious water tearing through your front door. The river rose with terrifying, unimaginable speed, swallowing entire farms in a matter of hours, turning the quiet pastoral valley into a violent, churning inland sea. Families scrambled onto the corrugated iron roofs of their homes in the dark. Imagine sitting on a freezing, slippery metal roof, wrapped in wet blankets, shivering in the relentless rain. You are holding your children tight, listening to the horrifying sound of your furniture, your photographs, your history, and your entire life being crushed and swept away into the dark, roaring abyss beneath you. After that second catastrophic flood, the government made a final, brutal decision. Kelso was completely condemned. Every single resident was forced to leave. The town was legally and physically dismantled. Today, if you drive through West Otago, you will not find Kelso on any modern road sign. The earth has closed over it. If you know exactly where to pull over and walk out into the empty paddocks, you might find a few strange, unnatural clearings in the grass. You might trip over a moss-covered concrete foundation slab completely choked by thistles and wild blackberry. There is a single rusted survey marker standing stubbornly in a field, marking the spot where a bustling town center once stood. The land remembers what happened here, but it refuses to speak. It is just empty space waiting for the river to wake up again. From here on, we enter a territory of absolute, deafening silence. Tell me down in the comments right now, could you spend a single night alone in a place like Ohura, listening to the wind rattle the empty storefronts? Let me know. Level 5, the abyss, the unsettling. The light from the surface is gone entirely. We are plunging into the true, untamed West Coast bush, a place of suffocating, endless green and perpetual weeping rain. Down here in the abyss, nature is not just slowly reclaiming the land, it is aggressively, purposefully erasing the human stain. The environment here does not tolerate weakness. Deep in the damp, labyrinthine valleys of the Victoria Forest Park lies Big River. There are no paved roads leading to Big River. There is only a brutal, muddy, four-wheel drive track that has been violently carved through an ancient, dripping forest canopy. The journey itself feels like a descent into the underworld. In the early 1900s, driven by the insatiable, blinding lust for gold, men dragged massive, cast-iron stamping batteries through these treacherous swamps. They did it using teams of exhausted draft horses and sheer, desperate human willpower. They carved a settlement into a place that was never meant for human habitation. They dug deep, claustrophobic, dark shafts straight down into the hard quartz rock, chasing a vein of gold that plunged endlessly into the black earth. Today, Big River is deeply, profoundly unsettling. It is a microscopic ruin entirely surrounded by a terrifying ocean of hostile wilderness. The most imposing structure left is the massive wooden poppet head, the gigantic towering frame used to lower the miners in small iron cages into the black depths of the earth. It still stands today, towering over the suffocating bush, looming in the thick white mist like a rotting medieval gallows. Imagine standing at the edge of the main mine shaft. The air around you is terribly, unnaturally cold. The shaft is flooded now, a seemingly bottomless pit of black water. You pick up a heavy stone and drop it into the blackness below, and you wait. The sound takes an eternity to return. It is a hollow, echoing splash that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The forest here does not welcome strangers. The few hardened hunters and trampers who make it this far often speak of an overwhelming, oppressive feeling of being watched. The dense, dark stands of native beech trees press in on the ruins from all sides, suffocating the light. The old miners' cottages are sinking, millimeter by millimeter, into the acidic, boggy soil. Their rusted, corrugated iron roofs groan and buckle under the weight of the endless, punishing West Coast storms. It feels like a place where the dead never truly left, simply because they had nowhere else to go. We have reached the edge of the precipice. Ahead lies only the abyss. Level 6. The darkest point. Absolute dread. We have reached the absolute bottom. Down here there is no light. There is no hope of revival. The places at this level were not abandoned slowly, and they were not dismantled by government decree. They were violently, instantly extinguished. They are places of absolute dread, where the echoes of sudden terror are baked into the very soil. Read the next words carefully. Listen to the silence between them. Let us travel to the thermal heart of the North Island, to the dark, glassy waters of Lake Tarawera. Before the winter of 1886, there was a thriving, bustling settlement here named Te Wairoa. It was a place where two worlds met. The local Tuhorangi Maori people and European settlers lived and worked side by side, guiding wealthy tourists to the legendary, magnificent pink and white terraces. Te Wairoa was wealthy, it was loud, it was deeply alive. But the land here is alive too, and it is entirely merciless. 11 days before the end, a warning came. It was a warning ripped straight from the darkest of Maori legends. A tourist boat was out on the cold waters of Lake Tarawera. The passengers and their Maori guides looked across the mist, and they saw something impossible. They saw a phantom waka. A traditional war canoe, massive and silent, gliding across the water. There were figures in the waka. They were paddling, but their paddles made no sound. They were looking down. The local Maori knew exactly what this meant. It was an omen of death. A taniwha, a powerful spirit of the deep, or the souls of the dead coming to collect the living. A suffocating dread fell over the village. The dogs began to howl at the mountain. The air tasted of sulfur. Then came the 10th of June, 1886. Midnight. The earth began to violently heave. Imagine waking in your bed to a roar so loud it shatters your windows. It is not thunder. It is the sound of Mount Tarawera ripping itself apart. The sky turns completely, terrifyingly black. And then, the mountain begins to rain fire. Millions of tons of boiling ash, glowing rocks, and suffocating mud fell from the sky. It buried the magnificent terraces, it buried the forests, and it buried Te Wairoa. Imagine the absolute paralyzing terror. People huddled under their kitchen tables, listening to the roof beams groaning and snapping under the impossible weight of the wet, boiling mud. The air turned to thick, choking dust. There was no escape. The village was completely smothered. Over 120 souls vanished into the earth that night. Today, Te Wairoa is known as the Buried Village. Parts of it have been excavated. It is deeply, profoundly unsettling. You can look into the remains of homes abandoned in a sudden, violent rush. There are dining tables still set with china cups and saucers, petrified under layers of volcanic mud. A sewing machine rusted and frozen mid-stitch. The physical remnants of interrupted lives. The silence here is not just heavy, it is mournful. It is the silence of a place that was suffocated in its sleep. But there is one place even darker, one place even more isolated. Level 7. The Bottom of the Abyss. Complete Eradication. We have reached the ocean floor of our iceberg. This is the territory of complete, irreversible erasure. Far down at the very bottom of the South Island lies the raw, brutal wilderness of Fiordland. It is a landscape of sheer vertical cliffs, bottomless black fjords, and rainfall so heavy it can wash a man away. At the edge of this terrifying wilderness, in the late 1800s, humans tried to build a town called Cromarty. It was located in Preservation Inlet. The name itself is a lie. There is no preservation here. Cromarty was built on gold and desperation. It is arguably the most remote, isolated settlement ever attempted in New Zealand. There were no roads. There are still no roads. To get there, you had to survive days of punishing ocean travel through the roaring 40s, navigating treacherous, reef-strewn waters just to reach a patch of muddy, lightless beach. Read slowly. Breathe slowly. Imagine the claustrophobia. You are trapped between a sheer wall of impenetrable dripping green forest and the violent, freezing black water of the sea. The rain does not stop. It falls for weeks. The mud comes up to your knees. There is no escape. If the supply ship does not arrive, you starve. They built a pub here. They built a post office. They tried to carve civilization into the mud. But the sheer oppressive weight of Fjordland crushed them. The gold ran out fast. The isolation drove men mad. When the last residents finally fled in the early 1900s, they left almost everything behind. They just wanted out. Today, Cromarty is gone entirely. If you take a boat down to Preservation Inlet now, you will see nothing. The relentless, aggressive rainforest has swallowed the town whole. Thick, suffocating roots have wrapped around the old brick chimneys and pulled them down into the acidic swamp. The heavy, dark water laps against the shore, erasing the footprints of the past. It induces a deep, primal claustrophobia just to stand there. You are hundreds of kilometers from help. The trees watch you. The water waits. If you scream, the sound is instantly absorbed by the wet moss. It is the absolute end of the world. Take a breath. The darkness is behind us now. We are returning to the surface. When we look at these places, from the sunlit ruins of Macetown to the suffocating black shores of Cromarty, it is easy to feel a sense of failure. But that is the wrong way to look at it. The towns did not fail. The people who built them were incredibly brave and incredibly tough. But the world around them changed, and they could not change fast enough to keep up. The gold runs out. The coal is no longer needed. The river decides to shift its course, and the mountains patiently, inevitably, take their land back. It is a humbling reminder. We build our homes of concrete and steel, and we think they will stand forever. But nothing lasts forever. The earth always reclaims its property in the end. I'm a grandpa, and grandpas worry. Look after yourself. Be kind to the people around you, because time is the one thing we can never mine, and we can never buy back. Next time, we will explore the forgotten, rusted tracks of the logging empires, where entire railway networks vanish into the clouds. Until then, stay safe.